Good morning, everyone, and welcome to my session called DDEV, Centerpiece of Your Local Development Platform. My name is Miro Michalicka. I'm working for Jobiqo as a DevOps lead engineer, but besides that, I have also strong Drupal development background. I was Drupal developer for more than 10 years. I had Drupal agency, and I think that's really helpful if you are trying to build some platform for Drupal company. At Jobiqo, we are building job boards for job board operators. So you come and you get our product, which creates portal like jobs.heute, Ate, or Vienna Jobs. I am also DDEV contributor. I have a couple of commits merged, and hopefully a couple of them will soon come. What we will cover in today's session. So I will try to explain what DDEV is and how DDEV is actually working, because for some people it might look like mystery. And then I will try to cover what are the main features and how you can efficiently customize your DDEV environment. To the end of the presentation, I will also explain Jobiqo implementation, what are we doing, why are we doing it, why it might be a good choice for you, why it might not be. The one thing I won't do, I won't try to compare with different local development environments, because I was working only with DDEV for past 5 years, so it's pointless to compare with Lando from 5 years. So before I start with what is DDEV, who actually is using DDEV? Quick show of hands. Yeah, so I think it was majority of the room. So what is DDEV? So DDEV is Docker-based PHP, although that PHP won't be valid after the next release. It's development environment. We can also say that it's some Docker Compose wrapper, because what DDEV is doing, it ships some templates, it ships some containers, it ships some tooling, but in the end, what it's doing, it puts everything together and runs Docker Compose on your machine. And one interesting thing is that it's officially recommended local development environment for Drupal by Drupal Association. So if you are starting with Drupal and you go to drupal.org, then you get to the page where DDEV is actually recommended as tool to use. We can also say that it's a local development platform, which is performant, it's customizable, and easily to extend. And important thing, it's multi-platform tool, and it's open source. So if you don't like it, you can just fork it, customize, you can contribute back. Why I'm saying platform, maybe I should rather say ecosystem, because what it started, it was one tool, but now you can build your own extensions, which you are hosting in your own repositories, and then other people can fetch these extensions and use them in their setup. I'm not sure if you've seen this chart. It's from Drupal local development survey from this May, and DDEV is the most used local environment for Drupal developers. I was able to get data, raw data from this survey this morning, so I tried to look on how this data are looking for Europe, because this is worldwide survey. And in Europe, it was about a third of the responses from the whole world. So it's mostly copying the world. The interesting numbers are that if I filter only people who are using DDEV, or if the people who are using something else, then these core people, it's around 70 for DDEV, and around half of that for anything else. So Lando was 35 people, custom Docker was around 35 people as well. So these core fans of DDEV have the highest ratio among us. As I said, I'm going to try to explain how DDEV works. So when you have your project, then you type the first command, DDEV config. Let's assume that you are working with Drupal 10. So if you run that command, then DDEV looks, finds out that there is no DDEV configuration. So it takes its template and creates this DDEV folder for you in your project. And it copies some good defaults. When you run it the second time, then it looks what parameters are different in your config file, and it overrides only those parameters. When you run this DDEV start, then it takes your configuration file from your projects, and as I said, DDEV is shipped with some templates. So it takes this configuration file, maybe some other files, and try to hydrate this template, and the result is this DDEV Docker Compose full YAML file, which is then in the end run by Docker Compose. Besides this Docker Compose file, there are some containers which DDEV is running globally. Example would be DDEV router, which is currently running on Nginx proxy, but in the upcoming release, probably sometime next week, it will switch to traffic. And there is also DDEV SSH agent, which propagates your SSH keys from your local machine to containers. Your project will be running on .ddev.local domain, but you can bring your own domain. You can configure DDEV to do that. And the important thing is that even though you are running on some domains, DDEV is modifying your etc host if you are on Linux, and that way nothing ever goes to the internet, although it might look like that. So you are able to work from train even if you have no internet connection. This is GIF from how DDEV start is looking. So it spin up some containers, and then in the end prints your URL. And then when you run DDEV describe, it prints everything you have running in your project and how you can actually access those services. This GIF is from DDEV.com site, so you can check it there and check in greater detail. Now I'm going to talk about how you can extend DDEV, and the easiest way how you can start with customizing or extending your DDEV is by configuring it. And you can do it two ways. You can do it imperatively through CLI. So you run DDEV config and then name of the parameter. If you run just DDEV config, then DDEV will list all parameters for you. Or you can modify your local config YAML file and try to hack around with the parameters which are already there, or you can find some parameters on DDEV.com side and try to modify it. There is also global configuration, so if you run it with --global, then it overrides global configuration, which is later used for all projects you are running on your machine. This might be useful because later I will get to the example that we are overriding HTTP ports on some machines, and currently we need to do it per project, but that would be really useful if we are able to do it globally. That actually brings me to this example. So you can do some environmental overrides, and this is no DDEV's dark magic. This is coming from how Docker Compose is working. So maybe you don't know, but if you have Docker Compose .something.yaml, then these files are actually merged together and ordered by alphabetical order. So that's how also DDEV is working. I'm calling it environmental overrides, but more proper word would be local overrides, because you would probably try to test something on your machine, maybe PHP upgrade, maybe change type of database, and test something with it. So you create this config local YAML file on your machine in your DDEV folder in your project, and you don't commit it. So your colleagues are not affected by that. That was for the simple values, which are simply overridden. For lists, they are merged. So if I have in my config YAML this hooks array, this hooks list, but then in my local config, I have just empty array, then the result is still what I have in config YAML. Thankfully, there is parameter. So if you add this override config, then it won't merge this list, but it will override it. Another way how you can extend DDEV is using hooks, which are reacting on some events. I listed those which are probably most useful. So before and after start, before and after you import database, and before and after you import files. And then every of these events can execute multiple tasks. So if you look on the right, then you have a pre-start, and that task is executed on the host machine where we are copying some Git hooks. Or inside of the database, inside of the web container, we are executing drush updb after we import new database. And after we start whole project, we are running composer install. If you want to do something more complex, which is not suitable for hooks, then you can use commands. And there are some commands which are defined directly by DDEV. So you execute something in the container. By default, it's executed in a web container. You can, of course, specify the service. You can run drush directly, or you can turn on, turn off debug, xdebug. You can execute composer, or you can get into the container. More interesting part are custom commands, which you can execute on a host or within some specific container. We have this command for behead, so the first time you run it, it checks if you already have Chrome running, and if not, then it restarts project, and then on the second run, it already starts running tests. These custom commands are nothing, it's not some dark magic, it's just basically shell script, or it can be binary, and you place it in your DDEV folder under commands. We are executing this one on host, so it's in host directory, but if you would be executing something for the specific service, then instead of the host, you have name of that container. And probably the most complex thing are additional services. Add-ons are quite new thing in DDEV. That's why I'm calling it ecosystem, because you can easily run DDEV command to create this add-on. You can commit it to your repository, and if you tag that repository on GitHub by DDEV add-on, then it's automatically discovered by DDEV get command. On the right, you can see example of how I was able to get adminer into my project in just a matter of seconds. Yeah, the add-ons consist basically of Docker compose file, but then they can be shipped also with some global commands or with some additional files. They can have some install script, so they can take some YAML file and use it to generate their config. The second way is by using custom Docker Compose. In this example, we are adding some environment variables into web container. This next one is adding Redis service. So it's just the regular Docker Compose file. You name your service, and the same way as if you would be running it outside of the DDEV. The only thing you need to have are those labels, but that's just for better management. And the last way how you can extend DDEV or customize DDEV is using additional Docker file. You can have pre-Docker files or complete Docker file. This example is for our web container where we are adding some additional libraries for Solar, I think. Now let's move to our use cases in Jobiqo. So we are essentially using DDEV everywhere. We are using it on local machines in CI pipelines, which is maybe standard, but we are also running our utility script. It's simply our way how we are shipping the code, which is not strictly tied to project. As I said, we are a product company, so that might be slightly different because we want to have the same DDEV config in every repository. We have 150 repositories. We have ways how to distribute these DDEV configs, that we change them in one place, and then they are spread across our whole product. We briefly experimented with temporary environments, but we hit some issues there. Those issues were with basic out, but you can already use DDEV for Drupal pod, so when you are doing contribution on Drupal.org. Alternative for these temporary environments would be Gitpod or GitHub Workspaces. You can use DDEV there. There are guidelines how to set it up. For local machines, it was important for us that people without Drupal-specific knowledge were able to start the product quite easily. That was the first motivation. And then the next motivation was that we discovered that actually also onboarding new Drupal developers takes a bit longer because they need to install our front end in a specific way. So we containerized everything within DDEV, and we reduced this onboarding time by, on average, 90%. The issues we encountered on local machines were mostly in our custom commands, because we have some people who are still on Windows, we have people who are on Mac. Majority of the company is using Linux, and simply versions of shell utilities are not the same on Mac as they are on modern Linux systems. But there was nothing on DDEV part. I've heard from our Mac users that they have some performance issues, but I think that so first of all, we almost completely switched away from Mac, and right now we have a couple users which are running on modern Mac cores, and the performance seems to be much better there. Last thing I want to talk about one specific use case we had, and so we are running decoupled DDEV, but it can be with 0 to n separate front-end containers because our setup is that one Drupal can serve multiple front ends. And this was quite challenging because, yes, of course, we could run PM2 in container, or if we would be happy with having just ports, then it would be also quite easy just to expose it as additional service from web container. But as we wanted to provide the best developer experience possibly can, we decided that we will generate additional Docker Compose files per frontend. Then we will register every frontend in DDEV router. You can, since it was Nginx proxy, it was standard labels for Nginx proxy. And then in the end, we are printing, after you start the project, we are printing these URLs for frontend in CLI. It's unfortunately not possible to do it with DDEV describe. There is bug which, if you define one of these labels, then it takes just port and tries to print it with the default web container URL. Because of this, because we picked this setup, we had also some issues with our testing infrastructure. We are using both Behat and Playwright for performance reasons, and with Behat it's fine because you can run it in Drupal container. It communicates directly with Drupal through Behat Drupal bridge. But with Playwright is different. It's running directly in the front-end container, and it needs somehow to communicate with Drupal. So it was quite challenging to call Drush or some Drupal APIs, which are located in different container. Just to conclude my presentation with a quote from one of my colleagues, developers seem to like our setup because it just works. They don't want to spend time on debugging why some Docker Compose thing is not working, why they need to change something in their Docker environment. Everything seems to be working perfectly for them. Behat, Xdebug, Playwright. They can simply focus on bringing the value instead of playing with that Docker environment setup. We might be some kind of snowflake because, as I said, we are a product company. We want to have the same DDEV setup in every project, in every repository, which might not be case for you. Then if you need to write custom commands and heavily customize every of your project, then yes, maybe it's easier for you to run custom Docker setup, but this seems to be working for us. It might be also hard to modify DDEV if you want to have exact one-to-one replica of your production environment. I mean, it's definitely possible to get as close as possible, but if your production environment needs to run on some specific container, or if you are running in some specific environment that, yes, DDEV might not be the best solution for you. That's it from my presentation. Thank you for coming. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thanks for the talk. What would be the advantages of DDEV compared to something like Lando?
I don't want to go there because I haven't used Lando for 5 years. When I was using Lando back then, it was a bit more unstable, but I have no idea where it evolved. Okay.
Any other questions? Thanks.
Thank you.